Hello, I'm Deborah Pascali Bonaro of Orgasmic Birth, and we're here with our Orgasmic Birth Practitioner program as we positively prepare for birth and parenting. And today I'm really excited to have someone who's I've been following for a long time, a friend and a colleague, Tilly Storm. And I love your short bio. If lack of confidence, low libido, or guilt and shame around your sexuality are the cause of your bedroom woes, the hot, wild sex you never have anymore, or the transition into motherhood that sucked your libido dry, you need Tilly. She's the world leading expert in helping women revive sexual desire and feel sexy again. As a certified sex coach, Tantra and jade egg teacher, Tilly uses deep transformational tools and techniques based in somatic experiencing, trauma resolution, and ancient tantric wisdom and Taoist practices to help women transform their blocks to pleasure, turn on, confidence and connection, and helping them step into their fullest potential and power. And so, Tilly, thank you so much for joining us today. And your talk today is how to ignite desire and prioritize your pleasure without hormones, years of therapy, or trying things that don't feel authentic in the bedroom. And I know there's so much about you that brought you here today and that you're sharing that's transforming so many people's lives. So, welcome and tell us more.
Thank you so much for having me, Deborah. I appreciate it. Yeah, well, I am a holistic sex and intimacy coach, and I have my own journey into this work, as most people do. Relationship and sexuality were definitely not one of the things that I could say that I was good at in my 20s and early 30s. Now they're great, and I have, the most healthy, loving relationship I've had, and but it comes from having done all of the work and been there, done that. But yeah, it's interesting because what actually got me started on this journey into sexuality work and working with other people in their sex lives is my own birth. The birth of my firstborn.
I love that, right? Birth is so powerful. People don't realize, right, how much it opens us up. So, tell me about that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I had my first baby at home unassisted, so I had a free birth when I was 23 years old. I had trained to be an OBGYN. I was wanting to get into medical school to do that. So I actually had done rotations at a hospital with anesthesiologists and OBGYNs in my last year of undergrad, and just noticed all of the issues going on with birth. So when I had mine, I was like, okay, we're not doing any of that. So I ended up having the most amazing experience that was just like absolutely divine. And it was part of my soul's growth and a contract for being here at this time on this planet, because it was the thing that just like let everything else, the domino effect, right? So I had him in, a very short amount of time. It was a precipitous labor and birth. I was only in labor 2.5 hours, and he was born at home, and it was a beautiful experience. And it just made me question everything that I had been taught about my body and sexuality growing up in a very conservative Christian home, where I was shamed a lot for walking out of the bathroom with a towel around my body. My parents would literally fuss at me for doing that, not getting dressed in the bathroom. So there was just all of these subtle cues growing up that made me realize that, well, everything I had been taught about my body, that, desire is bad. You can't trust your body's nudges. You can't trust your gut. You can't be in your sexuality. You can't be sexual. Sex is for men. Pleasure is for someone else. It's not something you can give yourself. And if you can give yourself, it's only after everything else has been checked off the to-do list, right? Only after all of your chores have been completed. So my experience of sexuality was thwarted from a very young age through societal conditioning, parental conditioning, religious conditioning. And after that first birth experience, it was like, well, this is interesting, because my body knew exactly what to do. I knew that I could trust every instinct. So I had literally just proven everything I had been taught was wrong. And this was just what started it all. So I started diving into sexuality work about 2.5 years later, after the birth of my second son, which was also an amazing experience, but very different. So, yeah, I had realized that a lot of my own hangups around my sexuality, I was only able to orgasm in one way. I remember my partner at the time, when I was 27, telling me, like, don't you find it frustrating or difficult that you can only do it in this one way? And I remember thinking, actually, yeah, I do. This is pretty annoying now that I think about it.
Right.
So I started picking up some books around sexuality and reading them, and it was completely blowing my mind, because I literally had no idea what they were talking about. Ended up picking up a book on female ejaculation and G-spot orgasms, and I was like, what is she even talking about? Like, it was so foreign to me. I had no idea the language she was using. Like, tap into your body, feel the sensations. Having an orgasm is all about just feeling what's here right now and being present. I'm like, what? Made no sense. So I soon found out about the jade egg practice, which is something that I teach in now. And the jade egg just being an egg-shaped stone that you use in your vagina. You do different squeezes, releases, breathwork practices with it. And it helps you to reconnect to your body and your sexuality. But I had heard that it could help you release religious conditioning, feeling shame around your body. And I was like, oh, that's what I have. That's why I feel awkward wearing anything sexy. That's why I feel uncomfortable in my body. That's why, I have problems with having sex with the lights on, right? All of these things. It's like, oh, it's the shame, it's the guilt. So that just led me into learning the jade egg practice, eventually working at a birth center and doing doula and midwifery work for 7 years. That I saw I wasn't the only one that struggled with this. Many other women did too, which led me to you. And that's how we met.
I know. So amazing, right? That like you here connected that sexual shame and birth and how birth opened that for you. But so many others don't, right? We don't connect birth to our sexuality enough. So I'm loving your story, and I'm loving how your birth work kind of brought you around, and the jade egg. Oh my goodness. Like I remember when we were first talking about the jade egg, and I learned a lot about the jade egg from you and through you. And it's been so transformational for me too, in so many ways. But continue your story, because these are all so many important points.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I eventually went on to realize that my purpose on this planet wasn't quite in birth work. It was uh, through the doing of birth work that I realized that, oh, right, I'm here to help women, reclaim their sexuality, to teach them how to reconnect to that part of their bodies, that part of themselves, even after becoming moms. So I had just watched so many women, struggle with that part of their life after this big life transition of having babies. So and it wasn't just like, oh, it's my hormones because I'm breastfeeding, or I'm postpartum. No, screw that. After a year or so, like, that's not the issue anymore. It's way deeper than that. So let's dive into that, right? Of course, there's like this natural, yes, this is your body saying, let's not get pregnant right now. Yes, there's an initial phase of that, but most of our clients and the women we work with, they have, been finding all of the excuses not to have sex. Oh, I'm too tired. Oh, but the baby co-sleeps. Oh, but. and they just come up with all the excuses not to have sex, all the reasons they don't want to have sex, all the reasons that they don't feel sexy anymore because they're moms. And, this is something that is ongoing, that it doesn't just stop a year postpartum or whenever you stop breastfeeding, because birth has this way of awakening and pushing up all of our trauma and drama around our sexuality and our bodies. So, yeah, and that leads me to why is it that we tend to lack desire, that we have a hard time prioritizing ourselves and our pleasure after this initial postpartum phase, right? Why is it that many women struggle getting back into that or feeling like a sexy woman again after having babies? So there are actually 4 main reasons why we struggle prioritizing our pleasure and connecting with pleasure. The first one is what I mentioned and what I struggled with: guilt and shame around your body and sexuality. So it is the unconscious things, cues that we pick up very early on, like if you were ever caught masturbating or touching yourself when you're a little girl, and you were shamed for it, or your parents smacked your finger. Or I've even heard stories of people saying, "Yeah, my mom used to tell me, that I couldn't put my hands in my pants when I went to sleep," or just like the craziest things. Oh, it's so wild. All of these cues that we pick up on that create a facade of guilt and shame and of emotional repression that we end up having later on in our life. Usually by the time, we've either had a baby or we're somewhere in our 30s and 40s, we're starting to wake up to all of the repressed energy because we either now have anxiety or we're depressed because of all of the repression, right? So we're learning to tap into these emotions to heal and integrate them with the guilt and the shame. So yes, your guilt and your shame are definitely affecting your sexuality. They're affecting your experience of pleasure. They're affecting your ability to prioritize yourself, to get the help you need, to ask for what you want, to even know what you want. So many women come to us because they have no idea what they want or like sexually. They've never really explored it because they've never had they never knew how to do that, or they've always had a partner and they're like, oh, well, he just gives me pleasure. So why do I need to know that on my own? So yes, guilt and shame. If you've been raised in any sort of religious environment that, you got these early messages that your pleasure is bad, it's for someone else, or anything like that, this definitely is affecting your experience of lack of desire, inability to orgasm, difficulty orgasming, all of these things. The second reason that we struggle with our desire and pleasure as moms also is the negative religious, cultural, familial conditioning around pleasure and sex. So this is very tied into the guilt and shame, because that conditioning that we get often creates the guilt and shame. So there's not that much that I want to say about that, except that, there's either the emotional repression or there's the cultural conditioning. The third thing is unresolved trauma, and this can be sexual or birth trauma. I'm blown away by how many women end up in my programs who have had totally negative birth experiences that they had no idea were affecting their experience of sexuality and pleasure. The way that they view their vulva, or the lack of ever viewing it at all. Some women will say, it just doesn't look the same. Like nothing about it is the same. And I don't know how to resolve that. And I'm uncomfortable with it and all of these things. So even something as seemingly insignificant or unrelated as a not so great birth experience absolutely will affect your experience of wanting sex or feeling really sexy in your body. And we also need to mention, any unresolved emotional trauma. So emotional trauma from a past heartbreak, divorce, really terrible, attachment, detachment, that we didn't really have support around to process fully. And then the fourth reason that we struggle prioritizing our pleasure and really wanting and having desire, the lack of desire, is just not understanding our own erotic wiring and languaging through a lack of pleasure-based sexual education. So this is the basic one, right? This is the one that's, it doesn't require really going in and doing the deep healing work. It's more of like just a basic understanding of actually people have different erotic wirings, just like they have different love languages.
Ring the bell and subscribe for more Orgasmic Birth expert content. And if you're a birth practitioner, visit orgasmicbirth.com to learn about our special resources just for you, and follow us on Instagram at Orgasmic Birth.